world of rock and roll, this man, Mr. Wayne Kramer, is the real deal. His work, as you'll see up here with the MC5, is some of the best high-energy music that the planet really has ever seen. It's something, the MC5 is really something that everybody in a band, it's something you have to work through in order to be successful and if you're serious in being in a band. Brother Kramer has also worked in every genre of music, from the rhythm and blues of Was Not Was, to the avant-garde jazz of Sun Ra, to punk rock, to movie soundtracks, and he's simply one of the best guitarists you'll ever hear. Also, another wonderful thing about the man is that he has never backed down from his activist stances on drug addiction, prison reform, artists' rights, and other areas of social justice. Many of the activists from the 1960s have sold out or kind of become caricatures of themselves. Wayne Kramer is still out there fighting for his principles. And finally, what I think is most relevant to everyone here is that Wayne has been on every side of the music business, from artist to producer to you now currently own a record company? Record company owner. He has been screwed by the worst of them. Anyway, I don't really believe in the concept of heroes, but if I have a rock and roll hero, one of them is Brother Wayne Kramer. So please give him a warm welcome.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you.
Best intro I could come up with.
That was terrific. Well, it's an honor to be with you guys today and share what little I know about a life in the arts. And Dave's going to help keep me on track here. I thought, I'm just curious to know how many people in here ever heard of the MC5. Please raise your hands. Good students. Good students. That's fascinating. Because the MC5 was not a big hit band. We weren't the Rolling Stones, and we weren't Bruce Springsteen, and you know, we made 3 albums in the 60s and early 70s. The biggest one, the live Kick Out the Jams album, only sold about 150,000 copies in its day. It's done pretty well over the years. Seems like every generation discovers the MC5 again, and we sell another 10 or 20,000 albums that year. The musicians all seem to find the MC5 when they start connecting the dots back from the heavy metal bands and Rage Against the Machine. And we were from Detroit, and we were insane. We were crazed rock and roll youths. We thought we were going to change the world. And we were overtly political. We were passionately connected to everyone from our generation that felt like this country was going down the drain quick. And so we joined in all the action that we could get involved in. I found this on YouTube. Some of you may have seen it, but it's a fairly good performance of one MC5 song. And I thought it'd be just a starting point, and then we can move ahead.
When you see that, that's several decades ago. How do you look back on that, on the MC5 and on not only the music but the activism part of it?
It's complicated for me. You know, when you're young and you hurl your life into your career, your band, you think things are going to go a certain way, and you know, when I look back on it now, it didn't go according to plan. And what I see there is I see a group of guys that are totally committed to what they're doing, and they're doing it at the peak of their abilities. Great enthusiasm about the music and the sense of possibilities that things could change for the better, both for that band and you know, for young people in general, for all of us. That turned out to be a lot more complicated than I thought it was going to be. But that essential optimism, I think, is alive and well. No problem there. You know, I just, you know, have to admit, you know, I stole all those dance moves from James Brown.
Who else were you guys listening to back then to get that kind of a sound?
We came up, I came up like in the early 60s listening to music that I heard on the radio in Detroit, and Detroit had pretty broad radio in those days. There was great soul stations, great jazz stations, and the pop stations had a different idea about radio than you may have experienced in your time with radio. In those days, the idea was it a great song? Was it a great record? If it was a great record, it would get on the radio. And you would hear the Rolling Stones, and then you'd hear Glenn Campbell, and then you'd hear Henry Mancini, and then you'd hear Motown, and then you'd hear The Who, and you just heard all kinds of music all day. The thing was it a great record? So I was exposed to all that, and I was fascinated with the sound of the electric guitar. To me, there was something in the tone of an amplified guitar that wasn't like a regular acoustic guitar. And it was the sound of liberation to me. It was the sound of a way to not end up working on the assembly line at GM. That's what Detroit was all about in the 60s. You worked in the factories. And for me and the guys in the band, that was basically our option. And I saw a career in music as a way to get out of Detroit and a way to participate in a bigger world.
And how did the kind of political ideas that the band was a part of, how did you come up, I mean, not come up with them, but how did those, you know, formulate?
It was a point in time in American history that hasn't really come again, and hopefully won't come again. It's come close recently, where there was an agreement in my generation amongst people of my age group that the war was wrong. The war in Vietnam was an unjustifiable war. We couldn't make any sense out of it. We kind of felt like when the Viet Cong start coming through the Windsor Tunnel, we'll be there, you know. But so far they weren't, and it sounded to me like it had more to do with Shell Oil or some blurry political objectives than it did any threat to America. And it was polarized by the draft. And the situation in those days was that the government required you to go into the Army. And that will radicalize you quick when you can't justify the reason you're being asked to go to the other side of the world and kill somebody or get killed. That polarizes people quickly. And I was part of a generation. It wasn't just me, it wasn't just the MC5. It was young people all over America and, in fact, all over the world that thought that things were going in the wrong direction. And we were a part of that, and I felt like, you know, as an artist, part of my job is to report on the news, to sing my songs, to sing my stories of what's going on in my neighborhood and with my friends and in my life. And what was going on were the kinds of things that we sung about in songs like The American Ruse or The Human Being Lawnmower. That was one of Tyner's great lyrical metaphors, that the draft, he equated it with a human being lawnmower. Chop, 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 chop. So it's just part of life in those days, you know. The MC5's activism may have stood out from my contemporaries, you know, the Jefferson Airplane and Big Brother and all those kind of bands. They all kind of had a political consciousness, but they didn't quite have the aggression that we had in Detroit, because we were kind of cranky about things.
You guys were kind of more in people's faces?
Yeah, we were aggressive. We were aggressive about it. What's that clunk? Is that me? You keep hearing that clunk? Is that my? Is that the CIA?
Yes,
I hope
it
so.
is.
I was so disappointed after 9/11 when they came out with the banned song list, and none of my songs were on it. I was so discouraged.
You're probably like, wait, I'm not doing my job.
Yeah, I'm slipping.
When also you look back at the MC5 and how things developed, what do you think was successful about that? What do you think lasted and made an impression and maybe changed things?
I think what's lasted is that enthusiasm and that commitment. I think that's what each generation sees when they go back and they discover the music of the MC5. They hear a bunch of maniacs and they say, man, listen, these guys are nuts. That's great. It's visceral. It's a visceral energy release. It's not an intellectual thing. It's a meat thing, and the commitment, you know, the total commitment to what you're doing, because that, to me, that was the music that always had value to me. If I heard it in rhythm and blues, or I heard it in music in the black church, or I heard it in the free jazz of Albert Ayler and John Coltrane. You know, I heard people with a commitment and a passion to what they were doing that stripped away all the kind of everyday considerations. And when I was playing music, if I played it with more energy, more enthusiasm, people reacted more. So energy became kind of the guideline. That, you know, the more energy I put into it, the more passion I felt for it, the more people reacted, and the more we communicated.
Did also being in the MC5 and what happened with them, how did that contribute to your view of music business and how you have formulated your ideas on that?
I didn't pay much attention to business. I was mostly into it for the party and the music. And I don't mean the White Panther party. I mean the party. Is a, you know, great motivation. When I was a little boy, about the point I decided I wanted to be a musician, my mother said, "Well, Wayne, you know, I want you to do whatever you want, and this musician business is a hard life." Excuse me, it's my wife. Hi, honey. Yes. Yes, I'm doing it now. No, you get out. I will. See ya. I'll turn this off now. Where were we?
The music business, the party.
Yes,
The party.
The party. My mother says, you know, this business about being a musician, it's a tough life. You know, you're going to have to work during the night and sleep during the day. And you're going to have to play in nightclubs, you know, and people drink and there's drugs in those nightclubs. And there's loose women hang around with musicians. So if I wasn't sure about being a musician before that talk, I was certain afterwards. And she was right. It's all true. But I didn't, so my point being, I didn't pay much attention to business. And seeing that we're at a college and you guys are students and we're trying to have an educational experience. I'm trying to have an educational experience. I think it's important to pay attention to business. My days in this line of work tell me that I would have been a lot better off had I known something about publishing. If I had known something about record royalties, if I'd known something about contracts, if I'd known how to read a contract, if I'd known what I was signing away when I thought it was, isn't this all glamorous? Well, yeah, let's get our picture taken for the trades. Yeah, here we are signing the contract. But, you know, that contract, you know, is the thing that dictates how I get paid for the rest of my life. And I think that that's the thing, if I had, amongst other things to talk about with people that were embarking on a career in the arts, is it's up to you as individuals, you're self-employed, to educate yourself about your business. Because the alternative is that you end up like many of my contemporaries, which is bitter, broke, destitute. I mean, you know, the business side of the arts was not set up for the artists. It was set up for the business people. When the publishing industry was conceived, it was set up for the publishers, not to protect the writers, not to make money for writers. It was designed to make money for publishers. And today, and throughout these last 40 years of the music business as we know it, the people that end up with the money are the guys that own record companies, the lawyers, the publishers. Rarely do the artists end up with any money. Doesn't mean there isn't money there, doesn't mean you can't make a living doing this, but it's up to you to educate yourself so that when somebody puts a contract in front of you, you know what you're signing. You know how to advocate for yourself. You know how to argue for better percentages, you know, to argue for your own rights.
Given that the music business is changing so much these days and so quickly, what are some opportunities you see for artists such as yourself or such as some of these folks out here might be?
I think the opportunities stay the same. I don't really think there's anything's much different. I think the delivery system is changing. The internets, you've heard about them?
I have.
They're changing everything, and of course everything's in a great upheaval right now. But the job of the artist remains the same, which is to tell a story, and to tell that story with your instrument if you're an instrumentalist, in your songs if you're a songwriter. You know, the artist that's a painter has to tell a story in his paintings. If you're a writer, he has to tell a story in a screenplay or in a novel. everything that we all do is storytelling. I do it with the guitar. I'm telling a story. So all that part of it remains the same. And I think will remain the same because art in the context of our lives is essential. It's the way that we hear the stories about ourselves so that we know we're not alone. It's like why Oog and Og painted on the cave, yeah, today I went out and I killed an antelope, and here's how I did it. Because he's trying to tell the story of his life, what he did that day. And through seeing that story, we know what his story was, and we know what our story is. When you write songs, when you write screenplays, when you play a solo, when you construct some chords together, that's what we're all doing. So that's not going to go away. We need stories. We will always need stories. This is ancient. As long as there's been humans, we've been storytellers. And that will continue. Finding the form and getting paid for it, that's changing. That's shifting all the time.
Do you find it's a difficult balance between being a creative artist and also looking out after the business interests of being a creative artist?
Do I find it difficult?
Yes.
Sure. It's a challenge because, I'd rather fool with my computer and scroll through some cool sounds or figure out some new chord changes on my guitar and not read contracts. But if I don't read contracts, I don't get to play with my computer. I mean, that's the way it works. Everything we do travels on a sea of contracts and paperwork and phone calls and faxes and emails and meetings. I mean, I live in LA. We go to lunch as a way of life. Business is done at lunch. It's how we do everything. I go to enough lunches, then I get to play music. I don't go to any lunches, I don't get to play music.
Or you don't get to get paid for playing music.
That's true, yeah.
Still get to play it, but
Yeah.
getting paid is the idea.
No, but that's a good point. If you want to just play music for people, that's a perfectly great reason to want to be a musician. If you enjoy getting up in front of your friends or in your living room or in a club and just playing music for your friends, that's a great reason to be a musician. That's perfectly fine. The problem comes when you think that playing music and you achieve success, it's going to deliver you to that good life that you read about in magazines and you see on television. This is a lie. This is a lie that we sell in Hollywood, and we mostly sell it to you guys, young people. And it's the lie that says you could be be poolside, and you could have bling, and you could drive a Denali, and it doesn't work that way.
All your troubles will be gone if
Yes.
kind of thing. Mm-mm.
Yes, no, it doesn't work that way. If you're troubled and you think that your solution is going to be found in being an artist and you achieve success, not only will your trouble not be better, you'll be worse. And at a certain point along this career arc, the wonderful pain-killing properties of Jack Daniels and heroin show up. Cocaine, ecstasy, they become a good option when reading contracts gets to be a headache and having to deal with people gets to be a headache. And it's a problem that doesn't get talked about much in show business. And I don't know how much you guys talk about it here in school, but it's a problem that I see from my end, and I lived through the course of my life, because at a certain point, the MC5 broke up, like all bands break up. And I had talent, but you know what? Talent isn't enough. I had that talent, and that talent shot me out here, and then one day, there was nothing underneath me. And there were no friends, and there was no support system. And so what else could I do? I got loaded. That was my solution. I figured that all on my own. Brilliant. I'm brilliant like that. And I'm not dissimilar to a lot of other people that pick careers in the arts. So it's something that needs to be looked at, because I see it on the other end now. I live in Los Angeles. Today, I found a way to live where drugs and alcohol aren't necessary, and I work with other people that have the kind of struggles that I had. And I see them in the movie business, in the music business, and they had that band. They had a plan. They had everything going on, and then it all went away, and they couldn't figure out what happened. And then they got high, and many people die. There's a high attrition rate in this game. There's a culling factor that happens. And I don't say that to scare anyone, because I don't think I can scare you, but it's just a fact that, we invest so much in the art and in these hopes and dreams of a career, and when they get crushed, it's heartbreaking. And without something underneath that, without some kind of a character that lives by some kind of a principle, and some kind of a principle that's not success, but that's a principle that has to do with being a decent human being, that has a principle that has something to do with caring about how other people feel, then you have no choice. You're gonna have to succumb to it. So, there's a lot that goes into it. Maybe at some point we could open the floor up, and
I was going to say that might be a good time to
get some questions from you guys.
Questions.
If I said anything that's unclear or anything else you want to talk about, there's nothing that I consciously remember that I won't talk about. So I'm going to ask you guys to educate me now with a question. The one with the hair. That narrows it down. I'm on the far end of the stage over there. I was the one doing all the dance moves with the big, not the lead singer, the guitar player. Yes, I had hair one day. Lots of it. Sure. Sure. One of our crew was in jail. We were arrested a lot. Because of our stance in the Detroit area, we generated a lot of heat from the Detroit Police Department. And, we told girls to burn their bras, and we advocated free sex, and we smoked marijuana openly. And one of our guys was in jail, and he read in the Black Panther newspaper that Huey Newton said there should be a White Panther Party to do parallel work in the white community that the Black Panthers were doing in their community. And we said, that's us. We're ready. And so we formed the White Panther Party out of our frustration with the slow pace of change. We were young, and we wanted what we wanted now. And, it was symbolic and artistic in a lot of ways. We liked the graphics. We liked the clothes, the black leather jackets. And it was a cool look. And we were also sincere to a degree about by any means necessary. It was a very violent time. Malcolm X had been assassinated. Martin Luther King had been assassinated. Bobby Kennedy had been assassinated. And we just felt like violence was an option. But today I look back on that and say we didn't think that through well enough. And that was a mistake. Because once you start to use the image of the gun, the picture of violence, you can't control the outcome. And for the Black Panther Party, it got them death squads. Black Panthers were murdered all across America. Every city that had a Black Panther chapter, there was a drama and people were killed. And for us, it got us prison sentences, incarcerations, indictments, constant harassment, and got us kicked out of the music business, basically. The record company said, you guys are too much trouble. You guys are we just wanted to, we wanted to do rock and roll, and you guys have all this political stuff, and we don't want to be involved with that. So, a lot of it was kind of fantasy. We grew up on television, where you shoot it out, but the police ain't playing fantasy. They use real guns, real bullets, and at some point, I had to kind of revise my thinking about that, and just conclude that you cannot use violence to promote your social justice agenda. That they have more guns than we'll ever have, so it's got to be a different way.
Can you kind of step through what happened after the band broke up, and how did you get to where you are now, and kind of what are you doing now?
Yeah.
What was the trail?
Mm-hmm. After the band broke up, I told you I described this situation of having nothing there, and I turned to crime. The scene in Detroit was very tough in those days. The focus wasn't on Detroit anymore. It had moved to another city, and so gigs were short, and I discovered that I went into kind of a negative world where bad was good. And, it even shows up in language, when people say, oh, man, that stuff was bad, meaning that stuff was good, except this stuff was bad. And my behavior and the people I associated with went lower and lower and lower and lower. I became a lower companion, and ended up going to prison for a couple years. Came out of prison and tried real hard to start to get back on track. Met a wonderful jazz musician in prison, Red Rodney, trumpeter that played with Charlie Parker. He became my mentor and musical father. And then went on a long journey to sobriety, really, because I had to get sober before I could ever begin to work again or be responsible or show up for my life. And it took a long time. But I finally found a way, and in the early 90s, I moved to Los Angeles and did a record deal with Epitaph Records, great punk rock record company, and made some albums with them. Left there, formed my own record company, figured I'd been on the artist side long enough. Maybe I could contribute something on the label side. Maybe I could advocate for some other artists. And began pursuing a career in film and television. And that's what I do today. I score a show for HBO called Eastbound and Down. And I score movies, and I still tour, and still play out live. I always will. I love playing music for people. I just finished doing this year's Justice Tour. I do with Tom Morello from Rage Against the Machine. Every year we do a tour where we do a day of activism and a concert in different cities across the country. And we pick a social justice group in each city. We work with them for a day, and then all the money from the concert and all the merch goes to that group. And our motto is to feed the hungry, fight the power, and rock the fuck out. I scored a movie that we're going to show tomorrow night on the history of America's attempts to deal with drug addiction as a social problem called The Narcotic Farm. In which room, Kevin? Freeman Auditorium at what time? At 8 o'clock tomorrow night, we're going to screen the film. It's a terrific documentary on how America first tried to deal with addiction as a problem, and needless to say, failed miserably. 2 million people in prison in America today, and 60% of them are there for nonviolent drug offenses. Something's seriously wrong. We can talk more about it tomorrow.
My dad grew up in Detroit, and he's told me about, he was like just about to enter college right around Vietnam, and he just remembers it as just such a confusing time, and he was finding himself musically, and he was into a lot of different things, but he just, I think he hitchhiked to the Grand Canyon, and that's how he dodged the draft. But like, we don't know what that time was like. We don't know all the different modes of music that were so political and so, activist. And my question is, what do you think it's possible for our generation to, there are no bands these days that are that political. We've grown up with this war now, and yet there's no one band that has a mission like that, Different bands have certain songs, and like, that's great. But do you think it's even possible for our generation to have something like that? It's a different time, but do you think it's, I don't know, I forgot.
I get your question. Yeah.
Like, it's just so different. Nobody's as aggressive these days.
Mm-hmm.
So is it possible for us to even be that motivated?
Mm-hmm.
I guess.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think the thing that organized my generation was the conscription. That when you're faced with having to go, most people grew up in a house that said, if the government says you got to do this, then you got to do it, because they come from, my parents are from the World War II generation, and you got to go in the Army, you got to go in the Army. That's how it is. The idea of not going was, you couldn't even conceive of that. So for the Vietnam generation to say, hell no, we won't go, this was unheard of. It was a sea change in the culture of America. The country was split down the dinner table between the father and the son. So without the motivating force of conscription, of the draft, I'd be hard pressed to say that could happen again. But you know what? The election of Barack Obama meant a lot to me, because I think Barack was astute enough to see that you guys aren't like my generation. You guys are a different generation. In my generation, most of the white kids hung out with most of the white kids. Most of the black kids hung out with most of the black kids. Nobody hung out with Chinese people. Nobody hung out with Latinos. Everybody's stuck on their own, in their own neighborhoods. And I see young people today, everybody of every color hangs out with everybody. Everybody's on YouTube. Everybody loves hip hop. Everybody's into everything. And I think Barack saw that, and he said, we got a different equation happening now. This is a different time. And I think you guys have the possibility to change the world. You guys are positioned really well. I just see signs of it. People, when they talk about the economic downturn, and but then all these activist groups are showing up everywhere. Clean up the neighborhood, do community service. This stuff is terrific. That's what activism is all about. That's what democracy is all about. Democracy is participatory. It's not a theory. It's something to do, and it's required. Participation is required for it to be sustained. If nobody participates in it, they'll take it away from you. So I think there's a great opportunity ahead for people to experience things that haven't happened maybe since the 60s in terms of unity, in terms of purpose, you know, a sense of accomplishment that has meaning and value, real meaning and value, not, you know, a new iPhone and a flat screen TV. That's, you know, that's nice, but that's not real meaning and value. Real meaning and value has to do with helping people. Oh yeah, Malcolm Gladwell, Outliers, you know that book? He talks about to achieve anything, you got to put 10,000 hours into it. So figure that's 10 years of work, you know, to have a career. It'll take you 10 years to get somewhere, to get started.
And you will have to pay your dues a lot longer than you want to, or you think you will have to. Yeah. What I've also found. Did you have a question?
Thank you. It's kind of a little jump of subject, but what's your take on music today? Like, do you have favorites, and what do you think about the quality of music and this whole independent revolution, if that's what you could call it? Do you think that what do you think that's gonna do to our music? And kind of tying back, like, we don't really understand what life was like 40 years ago, you know? It's hard for us to wrap our minds around it, and so we're all stuck in all the music we've been listening to, and what do you think about its quality, and do you see it improving now that the major record labels have kind of not found their place anymore?
Basically, you're asking me what I think of music today. I think that what's happening in popular music today is the end result of music that's been cultivated by record company executives with no artistic content whatsoever. I mean, what I'm saying is these executives are only looking to sell pieces of plastic. And so it's ended up creating a generation of artists that aren't trying to tell you a story that's original. They're not, I don't hear anyone playing anything or saying anything or singing anything that I haven't heard before better. So I hold the artists responsible for that to a large degree, but I also hold the culture around the artist that creates that in the terms of, you know, you have to go to the gatekeepers. You've got to go to the record companies. And if the record companies want you to sound like Britney Spears or Megadeth or whoever they're selling that week, then everybody's going to try to sound like that. It's like the difference between, there was a day when a record promo man would come into the radio station. He'd say, "Have I got a record for you? You've never heard anything like this before in your life. This is going to slay you." And he'd put the record on, and the guy, "Oh, yeah, yeah." And then today, if the same guy came in, he'd say, "I got a record for you. It sounds just like everything you're listening to." You see what I mean? So they're not cultivating originality. They're not looking for the original. There are original artists out there, absolutely. I mean, Anthony and the Johnsons, there's dozens and dozens and dozens of unique artists out there, talented people, but you got to look for them. You got to find them. You got to get on the internets, and you got to dig deep. You know, you got to go to Daytrotter and all these obscure sites and find these baby bands that are toiling away in Lawrence, Kansas, but they came up with some brilliant idea, you know. That's how you got to find it. I mean, it's one of the great things about the internet. You know, if I'm interested in Czechoslovakian reggae music, I can get in there and maybe I could find some. But you won't find it coming down the mainstream, the main pipeline, because they're shoveling product at you. That's all. They're just shoveling more of the same, you know. And they shovel it to younger and younger kids, Hannah Montana, the Jonas Brothers, because little kids have no idea what anything means. Everybody else likes it, so I like it. Because they're little kids, you know. I mean, you got to be around a little while before you even have an opinion about music or some idea. Well, gee, I like music that, you know, is dark, and okay, or I like music that's happy, whatever. It takes a while to formulate your ideas, you know. So I think the possibilities are there, and maybe the internet can open this up. And some of those, because I think we're all looking for good music. I'm looking for good music. And I got to go find it. And I think the internet helps, you know, it's a pathway to good stuff. You know, it's all kind of in flux right now because we haven't figured out the delivery system and we haven't figured out how to get paid. And that's really important. Because if labor doesn't get paid, then production stops in any industry. And that's what happens in this industry. Me? Yeah, I'm a socialist, communist, fascist, anarchist, extremist. Yeah, me and Barack.
What was it like working with Sun Ra? And what's he like as a person? And did he talk about Saturn a lot? Like
Sun Ra was, yeah.
I'm glad he asked that. I was going to ask that too.
Yes, he talked about Saturn a lot. Working with Sun Ra, you know, my relationship with Sun Ra started in the 60s when we would have him come out and open for the MC5. And we were the house band at a place called the Grande Ballroom, and it was like the beginning of the hippie dance ballroom thing. And we would play our set every night, and we'd play rock tunes, aggressive guitar rock. And then our last number was our space number. We'd go out in that one. And the kids liked it, they understood, and they got it. But then the night we had Sun Ra with us, Sun Ra starts out. And it was kind of like touch and go for a minute, because these are all like Detroit greasers, you know, and they're like, hey, what's up? You know, there's all these black people and all these spangly clothes, and the music don't have any beat, and there's no key, and it sounds like they're all going honk, 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 honk. And then after a while, I think somehow they connected it back through what we did, because we're white rockers. Back through, they saw it, and then they just went nuts. And the Detroit audience loved Sun Ra in the orchestra, and he came back, played for years. So I would hang out with him. You know, he would hold court after the gig, and you just kind of sit at his feet. I asked him once what he thought about my band, the MC5, and he said, the MC5. He said, I got to be careful with the MC5 because you're trying to catch up to me. So, you know, what he did is he brought an advanced idea to music. He brought a post-Western concept of rhythm, melody, harmony that wasn't held down by European musical concepts. He drew from deep in his own imagination. You know, he came up that kind of Kansas City piano style in Chicago, played in rhythm and blues bands and Fletcher Henderson and those kind of bands, and just started developing his harmonic ideas parallel with what Thelonious Monk was doing and with what John Coltrane and Albert Ayler and Cecil Taylor, you know, parallel. There was a whole movement then of a lot of composers moving the music forward, moving it forward and moving it out. And he had this just tremendous group of musicians with him that stayed with him for decades. They all lived in one house in Philadelphia, and they rehearsed day and night. Like Charles was saying, you got to rehearse. The Sun Ra Orchestra rehearsed day and night. Sun Ra might call a rehearsal at 3 in the morning, might call a rehearsal at noon, and everybody was just ready. You just got to be ready. And they loved the music, and they loved him so much. And the orchestra still performs, and I still do shows with them. They recently came to LA and invited me to sit in with them. And it doesn't get any better for me as a musician than playing with these guys, because, you know, they've been playing together so long, and some of their arrangements are so stretched out that I have to lay out. I just have to stop playing, you know, just, okay, you guys play for a while. So it's, he just opened me up, Sun Ra. He, you know, presented the idea of the open mind to me, what an open mind could be, and let new ideas come in. And the thing about Sun Ra is it's not defiant music. It's not music that's designed to alienate people. And it's not elitist music. Anybody can dig. If I dig it, anybody can dig it. I'm not any smarter than anybody else. And if I love what he does, anybody else could. They just haven't been exposed to him. It's like these record companies. They didn't give Sun Ra a contract on Columbia Records, you know. They didn't try to put him on MTV, and they should have. Think we're done?
All right.
Well, one last burning desire, one last question from anybody? Yes.
What are you listening today?
What am I listening to? I'm listening to Gershwin and Cole Porter. I'm trying to unlock what the great American songwriters of that era did, because I think they were the apotheosis of American song construction, lyrically and harmonically. What those guys wrote was, you know, that whole, the American canon of Broadway show tunes, I think, just the construction of them is, I'm mystified, so I want to get in there. That's what I've been listening to, music from the 40s. So thanks a lot, guys. Really appreciate it.
Wayne Kramer, y'all.